Hey, I'm Gunkrab. I'm a former pro AD carry who's been Challenger since 2016. I've got Challenger on EU West, Grandmaster on the Korean server before, and today we're going to go through the full Caitlyn guide, talk about items, runes, matchups, about her abilities, combos, and go over some gameplay footage as well. So starting off with Caitlyn's identity, what are we actually trying to achieve when we pick Caitlyn? The main goal of Caitlyn is to abuse her range and dominate lane. And in the meantime, we also want to focus on stacking dragons in the early game so that we have our late game win con secured. Caitlyn's typically a champion where you want to stay ahead of the curve. So in most matchups, if you're kind of even, it's not a comfortable spot that you want to be sitting in. But obviously, we can go through that in more detail later. So starting off with the items and runes. First item, we are going to be building Infinity Edge first, which might seem a little bit unconventional because the most common starter items would be Stormrazor or Collector. The reason why we are going Infinity Edge rather than those alternatives is because you're getting more bang for your buck, and Caitlyn's scaling with attack speed is not so great. Comparing IE to Stormrazor's build path as well, we've got BF Pickaxe Cloak versus BF Slingshot and Cloak. So in the case where you don't end up actually getting 1300 gold on your first base, which is a common occurrence, especially if you're 2v2 killing early, you're going to be stuck in a very awkward spot buying a Slingshot or buying a Cull. And Cull is a really important item to that's worth mentioning because of the fact if you do end up going Infinity Edge and you pick up a pickaxe, you don't end up getting a BF sword, we can just go Cull and maybe a tier 1 boots as well to kind of accelerate our 1 to 2 item transition. Now, really important thing to note about Season 16 as well, gold is a lot more accessible with the crystalline overgrowth mechanic on towers, tower plates being easier to grab in the early game. And also just overall, the minions are moving faster. So the time between waves is a lot less, and you're going to be able to catch up in gold a lot faster. Second item, we're going to go LDR or Mortal Reminder. Pretty much the only differential here is, do you need the anti-heal right now? And is anyone else on your team going to buy it? Because Caitlyn's not the best applier of anti-heal since she's mostly single target. The reason why we're going LDR or Last Whisper second is I did some damage testing between LDR and Hex Optics, and even with Hex Optics at the maximum range and getting the full effect of its passive, LDR was still beating it by 10 to 12% on auto attacks. So with that being said, and the LDR benefiting your Q and ult more because of the armor pen, LDR is just a better option, even if it is more expensive. This is also part of the advantage of going Infinity Edge first. We don't have to build it second, and the build path of LDR or Mortal Reminder is actually very accessible. You can pretty much base on any amount and buy a component and get stronger. Going from longswords to crit cloaks to noon quiver, every single component is extra power. Now, going into the third and fourth item, Hex Optics is going to be 99% of the time the third item that you're building, since it is just the most amount of damage, has great synergy with Caitlyn's headshot passive, especially from the range that you're firing using your net or your trap. But the other alternatives that we have are Bloodthirster, Rapid Fire, and PD. Now, we're only going to build one of PD or Rapid Fire. So PD or Rapid Fire, yes. Because otherwise we would overcap on crit. And the distinction to make between RFC and PD is that RFC is going to be our go-to pick, but if there is a situation where your team is lacking a lot of DPS, like drilling through the enemy tanks, and you're not able to actually, pick up a headshot and access the enemy backline, then PD is just going to be a lot better, since, if there is a 6k HP Scion, you can't get to the enemy backline without chewing through the Scion first. And BT as an option is mainly to deal with any sort of long range poke that you can't really deal with. Like you're dancing at the dragon and the enemy has a lethality Varus or a Zerath who can just very easily chunk you out, and if you get hit one of their spells, you're basically done. That's where the lifesteal actually plays a big part. Now, going into the situational items, first up we have GA. This might be one of the most overbought defensive items, and it is sort of bait in the sense that if you are versing a dive comp that wants to kill you and you are the soul carry, GA is a very valuable item. But there are some champions who have very low cooldowns on their rotations and can basically spawn camp your GA revive and just kill you again. Some examples are like Jax and Talia, where Jax can just prime up his Counter-Strike before you spawn, or Talia can line up the flick right before you spawn, and you'll basically just die again. More great option against heavy AP comps, a lot of unavoidable AP damage, so stuff like Fiddlesticks, stuff like Karthus, where you're pretty much guaranteed to take some amount of magic damage, and if they are really fed, then the Maw Shield and the MR is going to play a big part in surviving. QSS, pretty self-explanatory. The stats on the item are not great, but pretty much if they have a Malzahar, if they have some sort of target CC where you didn't take cleanse this game, so like a Lysandra and you didn't take cleanse, then QSS is a great option. And moving on to Randuin's as a fourth option. This one's a little bit more situational. It's a bit odd having a tanked item in the, situational pile of AD carry items, and it actually does have some anti-synergy with LDR's passive, Giant Slayer. But where this actually is a really good purchase is when the enemy is very heavy indexed on AD, and even better if they have multiple marksmen that use crit, kind of like a Kindred, like a Tristana. These sort of champions can access the backline because they match range and they have mobility, so you're kind of guaranteed to end up having a fight between you and the other marksman. This is when Rand was a really big part in mitigating a lot of damage and just surviving and outstat checking them. The fifth item we have, the lethality item Serpent's Fang. This is a buy if no one else can buy it and the enemy has multiple shielding champions like an Ivan and a Karma. Or maybe they have multiple shielding items, including like Seraphs or Moonstone, that kind of thing. Pretty much we only want to buy this if no one else on our team is willing to, or they can't. And lastly, we have Edge of Night. Edge of Night, very, very niche, very situational, where you don't want to buy this item versus multiple long-range champions who can easily scrape off this spell shield with, let's say a Corky Rocket or an Ash W. Then you'll pretty much be playing, dodgeball, trying to keep your spell shield alive rather than positioning where you should actually be. But it's very useful against, multiple assassin comps where, if they have a Kiana and let's say a Nefiri, the spell shield is going to help you mitigate some damage, and the base HP will also contribute a little bit. Going into the rune pages now, we've got the standard rune page, going lethal tempo. Presence of Mind is a must take on Caitlyn, since she is quite mana hungry by spamming her Q, but you're also at the same time proccing the mana refund very consistently, since you have that range advantage, and your Q is a very easy skill shot to land. Now, next we have Legendary Alacrity. Legend Alacrity, not Legendary Alacrity. This is the one rune that I would consider changing between Bloodline and Alacrity. I think with Caitlyn's identity, Alacrity fits it slightly more, just since it helps you win some early fights and some matchups where actually getting the push early game does matter. The 3% attack speed can actually contribute some. But Bloodline with the buffs, and if you are going to go 3 crit items or 4 crit items in a row, Bloodline does slot in nicely with Caitlyn. But yeah, I would say this is kind of personal preference. I'm more leaning to Alacrity just because most games, the game can be decided in the laning phase based off how you go in your matchup. Cut down, pretty much no brainer. If you don't have an execute, it's just better than coup de grace. Sorcery secondary, we're going Absolute Focus and Gathering Storm. It's the maximum amount of AD. Inspiration's just not that great on Caitlyn. We don't really want the extra skill point that badly. And, Cosmic Insight is kind of whatever. So the AD is fairly nice, but it's also really important for your level 5 Q what is it? Breakpoint, level 5 Q breakpoint, where your Q will one shot the back wave, and this sort of helps as well as going Infinity Edge first. And then for shards, we're going attack speed shard, adaptive, and scaling HP. The secondary rune page that we might consider taking is pretty much just fleet footwork and going alacrity. Fleet footwork, the times where I would take this rune is when you're versus a double range bot lane, and all-inning is probably not a common occurrence, I guess. So let's say you have like mage versus mage or enchanter versus enchanter, you have like Nami versus Karma. It's gonna be just war of attrition or die to a jungle gank. So this is where the move speed and the small amount of healing in the lane actually contributes more than the potential of lethal tempo, because if you're never really going to end up in an all-in from someone's engaged, then you're never really going to reach the fully stacked lethal tempo and get a full value. And now we can talk about some of the good and bad matchups that you might run into playing Caitlyn. First, we'll start with the good matchups. One thing that you'll see between these three champions is that they all have short range, and this is perfect for Caitlyn because in the early levels especially, it's very hard for them to fight back. And starting off with Kai'Sa, pretty much level 1 to 5, your goal is to just poke her down, and if she does try to contest the push early with her Acathian Rain, you want to make sure you're poking her enough that she's not able to find an all-in, because that's pretty much her only win con, is to all-in you off of a CC or at level 6 and try to ult behind you, where netting, hitting a net is really awkward when she's flanking you. So for the most part, levels 1 to 5, you should have a really easy time, but you just need to be careful about the plasma stacks that her support can apply, if applicable, and then her looking for a 1v1 all-in behind you. Now, Sivir, it's going to be pretty much the same story as Kai'Sa, but Sivir does have some pushback where, even though she is the shortest range AD carry, she can do a lot of like kind of ambient damage, let's say. Ambient damage with her Ricochet and her Boomerang Blade. So you really need to be careful about your positioning inside of the wave when she does have her W active. Xayah, pretty much same story where you heavily outrange Xayah, and Xayah's only win con as to early trades is landing, her Q and then auto and rooting you, subsequently just chasing you down with her W. But pretty much anytime you're going to walk up and hit Xayah, you're at the max range of her feathers, and you can very easily pivot from the left, from side to side, to kind of make it really difficult for her to land a Blade Caller. So the only thing about Xayah is just you need to be careful about tunneling too hard on the trade and then her pulling back the feathers. But it should be a really easy time. Let's talk about some of the bad matchups. Some of the champions here, they're very good at neutralizing the lane, and they all match Caitlyn's range to some extent. So, small tip about Ashe is her kind of win con in trades is landing the volley and then using the approach velocity to chase you down. So there's a couple things. We want to always make sure there's a minion between us and the Ashe so that she's not able to land the volley if we're going for a short trade. And second is being aware when she has her Q stacks fully stacked. Because if we end up going 1-for-1 against Ashe, she's gonna return with an auto and then the auto reset from her Q, and the trade is always gonna end up worse for you. Another thing about Ashe and Varus that is kind of troubling for Caitlyn is that they force you to take cleanse with their level 6 all-in threat. Otherwise, not having cleanse, you're pretty much just going to be a sitting duck in the mid to late game, and they're always going to have threat on you when you're up on the mid wave. Now, Varus is a little bit more annoying than the Ashe, especially if he does go the lethality build, But before first base, Varus is actually not that scary because he's very mana gated, and before first base, his E costs 90 mana, which is about a quarter of his base mana. And so the name of the game is pretty much take fleet footwork. We want to try and bait Varus' spells as much as possible and force him to use his spells on the creeps rather than poking you. But when it comes to recalls, and if he gets an early recall with a Tyr, Longsword, or Serrated Dirk, you're actually in a bit of trouble if you can't match with a BS sword. So, very tricky matchup, especially if the Poke Varus knows what he's doing. Now, Ziggs, last champion that I have on this list, it's probably the easiest one to lane against, but it's the most annoying in the sense that past a certain point where he does get Lost Chapter, he does get enough points in his queue, he can just infinitely wave clear and you pretty much can't hit his turret without extra assistance, or if you somehow pick him off. So, it's a very annoying champion to deal with, but the name of the game against most mages as Caitlyn is to try and look for an early recall before they can get Lost Chapter and before they can TP back and pretty much just hold you in lane. Because, yeah, Ziggs, like Varus, is very mana gated, and if he doesn't have mana, he can't fight back in the lane, he can't farm, and you can kind of abuse that and deny some early creeps before he hits that breaking point of infinitely wave clearing in front of you. Let's take a look at the best and worst support pairings with Caitlyn. I'm looking at a couple things when making this tier list. First is how hard can they dominate the lane with Caitlyn? And second, how easy is it to combo her net and trap combos with the support champion? Now, one thing to note is that these champions are not the tier list is not based on slightly based on their general power level, but you still have to pick them in the right spots. So with the first champion S tier, Braum, you're still going to have to pick Braum in a situation where he's good to have him S tier. If you end up blind picking him and you verse something like a Soraka, your lane is going to be pretty hard to play. But in the right spots where we pick Braum against the melee or engaged support, Braum is a fantastic pick where he can pretty much just put up a shield for Caitlyn and protect her, and his passive is perfect for the trap combos. Now, the two probably most popular support pairings that we see with Caitlyn is Lux and Morgana. These two kind of fulfill a similar role, except Lux is a better all-rounder. She provides more poke and pressure in the lane than Morgana. The only upside that Morgana does have over Lux is her spell shield. So if they have any sort of targeted, unavoidable engage, like a Vi, like a Maokai, Flash W, the Morgana spell shield has mega value. But in most cases, Lux is going to be the better champion and provide more utility. Anivia and Zoe, these two champions are a little bit more unconventional, but they're rising in popularity. I think both sort of serve the same role, but in different ways. Anivia is very obnoxious with her wall, in the sense that it forces you to walk in a certain direction, and you're gonna be finding success hitting your Anivia Q and chain CCing with a trap afterwards, or just placing your trap in the line of in the path that they're gonna take around the wall, and it's very annoying for the enemy champions, especially if they have no mobility. Zoe, pretty much very similar in the early game with Anivia, but she has a little bit more options where if she portal jumps, she can actually block certain abilities like Pike Hook, like Blitzcrank Hook, and just be really annoying. The main thing with Zoe, though, is her Sleepy Trouble Bubble. It's just super obnoxious. Pretty much once you enter the mid game, one Sleepy Trouble Bubble on someone and they're just gonna blow up instantly. And moving on to the A tier, a lot of the champions you'll see here are actually range sports. Some with very reliable CC and some without. But the reason I say this is just for solo queue purpose. A lot of these range supports apply a lot of pressure to lane, and we've got stuff like Karma, we've got Janna and Ivan, these sort of enchanters that are really annoying to deal with and can pretty much just lock you under the tower if Caitlyn just keeps up the pressure. Some unconventional champs we have here, maybe Fiddlesticks, maybe Elise, Nidalee, and Nika we don't see too much uh too much of right now. But these champions also kind of provide the same thing, where they have deadly CC combos with their CC, and just are really strong in the early levels and can guarantee you that push with that. Going into the B tier, a lot of these champions have pretty decent setup with uh, their abilities and can land very deadly combos with your trap. So stuff like Leona, stuff like Pantheon, stuff like Poppy. Some of these just vary in strength depending on the situation, but for the most part, these are solid picks. I wouldn't shy away from playing Caitlyn if I saw one of these champs on my team, but I would just think more a little bit about the bigger picture. Like, is the matchup something that we can actually dominate, or are they going to have a lot of wave clear? And can, like, if we're playing Leona, right, is Leona able to pressure in the early levels? Because depending on the matchup, Leona can either be a stronger or weaker level 1 champ. So if she's versus something like a Thresh where she's outranged and you're probably going to lose push, it's probably not the best game to lock in Caitlyn. C tier, a lot of these champions just serve the purpose of going in or just providing a little bit of utility. But for the most part, these champions are really hard to combo your trap and net with. Alistar is one of those champions who can actually combo really well with Kate, but as we all know, Alistar's early levels is pretty weak, and that's not something we want to just give up prior as Caitlyn if we're not going to regain it in the later levels. So if you're versing something like an Ashe Seraphine and your support locks in an Alistar, you're pretty much praying that your jungler is piling down and you're going to look for a gank. And that's where you can actually find some success with him. And champs in the D tier, Ashe is actually not the worst champ to pair with Caitlyn, but I'm saying this for the sake of solo queue, that you pretty much, if you have an Ashe support on your team, you probably want to look at dodging the game if possible, just because she can apply ridiculous pressure early in the right hands, but outside of laning phase, if you don't get a meaningful advantage, you're gonna struggle with just an Ashe support on your team, and she's pretty much just a hawk shot and an ulti. She doesn't give much else. And the other champions here, I don't think you need too much explanation. Set pretty much scales off after level 3, and Yuumi, pretty much no setup, not gonna use the steroids too well, and you're pretty squishy, just base stats with the base stats on Caitlyn. And Zilean just takes too long to come online. He scales pretty well with like the speed up, and you're able to play really aggressive later, but by the time Zilean is already like become like the fully fleshed out champion that he is, at least on support Zilean, then the game's already decided if you've kind of like dominated your lane enough, or if you've just fell behind as Caitlyn. So for that reason, you really want to avoid any of these D tier champions on your team and look towards some sort of range support that can actually help you dominate your lane. All right, we're gonna actually get in game and go over all of Caitlyn's abilities, her combos, and the max order that we are going to go. So starting off with her passive, every 5 attacks, Caitlyn's next auto attack becomes a headshot. And your W and E, if you hit those abilities, will give you a free headshot and give you double range. So her range being 650, you'll get 1300 range upon hitting your W or E. And so we can see the visual indicator above your ability bar showing your headshot counter, and when it's active, there's a sound effect and a very bright glow around your gun. Signals that you have the headshot. Bang. While you're in a bush, you also gain double stacks. So when you're at 4 as well, this is another way to kind of hide your headshot. You can auto attack with 4 stacks, and your next one will be headshot instantly. Next up, we have her Q. Fires a projectile, hits the first target and does full damage, and then after the first target, it opens up wider and does 60% of the damage. So just a small test here, you can see, like, if I'm aiming to the side of the target dummy right here, but then if I put a dummy in between and I aim at the same place, it'll widen up, the projectile will widen up, and it will also hit the target behind it. This is a really useful way to tag and poke the enemy through the minion wave rather than trying to get a direct hit, because the projectile is 66% smaller before it hits the first target. And then we move on to the W. Actually, I should pre-level. So we're going into our W. Places a trap. It takes about, I think it's 1.1 or 1.2 seconds to have the trap arm. And it sits there from 30 to 50 seconds depending on the rank. And you can have 3 to 5 traps out at the same time. And so here's what it looks like when you hit the champion. That's the range indicator from the passive. You get double range and you can proc it anywhere. I think it's between around 3 seconds. You can see it's right a bit longer than the root duration of the trap. So the trap roots the champion for 1.5 seconds. You get a little bit more time after the root expires to claim the headshot. And the net, what we have next is fires a net and pushes her backwards, and it also slows the target and gives you a headshot. Bang, knock you back, and gives you a headshot. You can also put yourself up against a fat wall, and you can come out of the net animation really quickly, even autoing before the net hits. Now the ulti, fairly simple. You choose a target, you gain true sight of the target, and you fire a projectile towards them, and it hits the first champion that's hit. So this is a really useful way of, you push in mid wave and then you're rotating towards a fight and you want to assist your team fighting in the jungle. This is a quick way to just add some damage and also make the enemies reposition awkwardly or group up together because they have to line up and block the projectile that you're trying to fire at. All right, and now let's go over some of the combos. So the most simple combo, the most used combo that you'll ever have on Caitlyn is the EQ combo. The reason this is so effective is that first you hide the Q animation during the net. So the long animation while you're queuing is mostly gone. And on top of that, your ears are slow, so it makes hitting the Q projectile, especially if there's only one target in front of you and you're not piercing your Q through anything, it makes it a lot easier to hit. Second combo that we're going to be doing is EW. Same reasoning, you hide the trap animation during your net, and you pretty much don't have any movement lag after the net. You can move freely straight after. And if we combine all of these abilities together, EWQ. I did it a bit slow there. Let me do it again. EWQ. You can land a very nasty combo, and this is very useful if you have any sort of ally CC, like a Lux Binding, Morgana Binding, and you want to do full damage. Important thing to note as well, your free headshots from your net and trap do stack on top of each other, so you can claim both the headshots like this. You can also do the combo in a little bit of a different way. Instead of EWQ, we can do W and then EQ. This is especially useful if the duration of CC is very short and you need to land your trap ASAP. Since the trap is the ability that takes the longest to arm, we want to prioritize hitting that because it's also our most amount of damage. Now, a few things with our flash. So we can Q flash. Oh, let me turn off the auto cooldown. We can Q flash during the animation. Basically, it's only used if you're trying to bait out skill shots or hooks and that kind of thing, and just want to do a quick reposition. We can do E flash, which if we press them at the same time, it'll teleport your net to the location of your flash. I also cover a lot of these mechanics in a short that I uploaded not long ago. And if we do E and then delay our flash by like just a millisecond and then flash, show you exactly what it looks like. Hop out of the net animation really quickly. It's kind of like being next to a fat wall, and you're able to auto the target almost immediately. One also key mechanic that I forgot to mention about the headshots from trap and the net. When you switch targets from any target to a free headshot like this, the auto attack windup is sped up slightly. So just for now, I'll leave it as this is Caitlyn's attack speed right now. Kind of just pretend there's a metronome going on. 1, 2, and then here's the switch. Oh, that was a bit slow. Actually, don't know why. There you go. There's the quick headshot. There's the auto attack windup. And now let's actually talk about practical use with our traps, because this is a very tricky thing that not a lot of Caitlyn players know how to master. Because let's say you're having a dragon dance, right? And we're on blue side. Placing your traps like this can be good to block off the enemy, but this is a very wide choke, right? So investing a lot of traps like this can be kind of useless if they just step on one trap and now these 3 traps are wasted, right? Because they have a clear entrance. So something to keep in mind as well with the traps is you want to create a trap line or a zone that is actually defendable. And what I mean by that is if an enemy steps on a trap here, do you expose yourself by claiming that headshot? Like, are you in a very dangerous position claiming that? If you are, then your traps are way too far from you. So let's say you want to play inside of the dragon pit, right? We would want to keep the trap line closer to you so that you can safely headshot the enemy if they do actually walk in or someone lands a CC. And we do want to save at least 1 trap every single fight, just in case someone has a CC ability and we can chain CC and lock them down, or you know, they have a stasis or Zhonya's or GA, and we want to save that. And it's very, very important you learn these sort of traps to be efficient with your space, because this is a very simple trap line that covers this entire jungle entrance, but I see far too many people place it way too close to the corner, and this covers no space, right? So we want to be maximizing the space of every single trap and making sure we're blocking it with the minimum amount of traps, which is in this case 3. And another thing, be creative with the traps. What I like to do around objectives or around fights is placing them around corners. And the reason why this is so important, let's just have a hypothetical where I'm entering the dragon through the bot side. If I want to get to the dragon, right, I just click towards here. Where's my champion going to auto path? Along the wall, because it's the shortest path possible. So just adding a trap along the, you know, shortest auto path is going to add some complexity to the enemy and make them have to click around it. And it puts more focus on them moving the character than actually focusing on what's in front of them. And these traps, although they may seem far away from each other, and they may seem like, who's ever going to step on this, right? The hidden effect of these traps is that they funnel the enemy in a certain corridor right here. So now the entrance that they're coming at is more narrow, and it's easier for your teammates to hit skill shots. And you can like be creative and even do something like this, right? Where now the enemies are shoehorned into the left side here. And imagine if you're a Jace or something, or you're Syndra, you just shock blast or you QE right through here, and it's like impossible to miss. So you can do many things with your traps to kind of like psychologically move them to a part of the river. And max order, let's quickly go over what abilities we're maxing. Q is always going to be our number 1 max. We're going to start level 1 with Q. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's our wave clear ability. It's our poke ability. Goes down in cooldown from 10 to 6 seconds. Base damage, 80 ratio. Everything that we love about that. Now the second ability, most games we're going to go trap. And I say most games because if you do have any sort of champions that have hard CC and you can chain CC your trap, it's a wonderful ability. And we get longer duration, we get a larger maximum amount of traps. Now, when do we actually max E second? Because this is actually not about ability to max. If we look at the stats, base damage goes up by 50. It's kind of, yeah, it's average, whatever. But the cooldown goes down by 2 seconds every single rank. And from rank 5 to rank 1, it's half the cooldown, right? If you can actually think, this is actually a pretty useful ability if there are multiple champions that are trying to dive on us, or multiple abilities that we need mobility for. So let's say Jarvan's Cage, right? So if I end up using my Caitlyn E and I have a 16-second cooldown at rank 1, I can't walk up to the Jarvan anymore, right? Because he's just going to ult me and then I'm trapped in there. So in games where you don't have a lot of reliable CC to chain CC with your trap, going for net second, especially against a lot of diving champions or champions you require mobility against, is actually like a very safe option to do. And the reason why like it hasn't been done before is because before trap max second was just the go-to, but if we actually look at some of the patch history, the trap max has just been nerfed over and over again. I think it's like 4 or 5 nerfs in a row straight up on, you know, the cooldown and the bonus damage. You used to have a bigger AD ratio, so this is something to consider. But I would say for most Caitlyn players and any beginning Caitlyn players, let's do Q, W, E, and then ult. Alright, welcome to the laning phase section of the Caitlyn guide. This is probably the most important part, where we're going to learn how we play certain matchups, what our objective is, and how we're optimizing our recalls, and even some of the mistakes that I'm making in some of these clips. So the first matchup we have here, playing Caitlyn Karma against Kalista and Renata. And it's really important to note what the enemy champions are trying to do, right? So Kalista, even though we outrange Kalista, she's a really powerful champion at early trades if she can get her spears inside of a minion and look for that Ren reset. So the first wave is sort of a nothing burger. Nothing really happens. We're kind of just trading the wave, and then what I'm looking to do here on the second wave is queue through all the creeps so that we can rush level 2. Because obviously here, Renata and Kalista are heavily behind on the push, and we go for the Karma W and get the flash. Renata takes some damage as well on the way up and flashes my Q. So really important thing on the second wave is to pretty much primarily put your focus on hitting the first 3 melee creeps, unless you've already decided that you need to concede the level 2 for whatever reason. Maybe you get chunked out level 1 too much. But yeah, here I get a nice spacing on Kalista, and Karma lands another root, and it just ends up being a straight up kill, because from the previous trade on the second wave, they have no summoners left, and Renata just completely blows up. And now the lane is sort of just already over for the Kalista and Renata, because their window to look for an all-in is around level 2, level 3, and now they're unable to. So we end up pushing the wave in, and I am going to recall here because, well, if I stay any longer, Renata's going to come back onto lane with full HP and probably a refillable potion, and it's just not favorable for us. It's better for me to just spend my gold right now, get a pickaxe, and continue to just dominate the lane. And you'll notice I'll always be pushing my wave before I recall. This is so that the wave is pushing into me. So either now Kalista has to match my base and just be behind on tempo, or she has to push the next wave, which she does right here, and I'm not going to miss too many minions. This doesn't even end up being a bad outcome. You see I only missed 1 melee creep, and now I can just start to slow push, and I still have control of the lane. And that's the really important thing about Kalista. If Kalista can never touch the creeps, she can never trade against the enemy. Because her only way of gap closing the engage is if Renata lands a CC, or if she's able to land like a QE while having spears in the minion. So meanwhile, my jungler's invading the Raptors. I'm having a look, like my support kind of just forgot that my Jace was there, I think. And now I'm left in the 1v1. And taking a little bit of poke, this is something you have to be mindful of, is just standing in front of the creep, but I'm still able to punish her for walking up for the cannon. I noticed that, okay, by now Renata's walking down the river, so I need to get this wave in ASAP and evacuate. So that's why I use my net for the last hit as well, to just eliminate any possibility of this Renata flanking me and turning this perfect wave state into just a bad time. And so I see Renata walking up, and if we just rewind, take note of the mid fight while I'm farming these creeps. I'm noticing that Talon is walking up into the river, meaning he's going to go to his top side likely. So with that in mind, I know that if Renata's running at me, it's only her and no one else is behind her, which is why I'm so confident here. And I'm pinging that I want to fight her in the river, but then I realized, oh, she has double buffs. She actually kind of hurts with just the auto attacks. Good thing for me though, Renata's cooldowns are really long, so anytime she uses her E, it's about 10 more seconds of safety. Here, I get a nice Q off of the Karma slow, and this is something we want to be doing sparingly because it costs a lot of mana, but it also leaves us vulnerable, right? I walk up with the Karma Shield, and as Callista moves in, I use my net, but now I'm on cooldown, right? I'm on cooldown for 12 seconds, so I don't want to be leaning too heavily into the enemy, right? I don't want to be all-inning right now. I'm just going to be playing inside of my wave, baiting out the spells. And here's a moment where I actually go a little bit too far. Here, for some reason, the tower grabs aggro really late, so I'm really surprised, and I lose about half my HP. And I'm also surprised by the fact that Talon's already here. Maybe this is just my mistake that Talon is one of the fastest clearers in the game, and I end up getting my support killed because of my overextending from before. So this is a very easy way of like throwing your lead around, throwing your lead as Caitlyn. Sorry, it's pretty much when you're playing in front of the tower and looking to harass, right? It leaves you the most vulnerable. So it's a very important skill to keep track of the jungle and also making sure you're not in a position to be engaged on by the enemy bot lane, which I was, right? I got hit by a Callista Q and then subsequently slowed and chased after, and I lost my barrier and got my support killed because of that. And what ends up happening is now I'm forced to base because Callista's pushed in the wave and based, and I have to go with a suboptimal base with this Cull, Boots, and Refillable. The next matchup, playing a little bit of, well, this lane is pretty much just a hard stomp. Playing Caitlyn Pantheon against Swain and Alistar. Really weak level 1s that these guys have. Swain pretty much only has his E that he's going to look for last hits or just fishing for passive stacks. And Alistar only really provides headbutt, but he never really wants to go in because he's going to take a whole bunch of damage for it. So little thing I'm doing there is called brush kiting, is where I step out of the bush, auto, and then step back in the bush to drop aggro. So I'm doing it multiple times here and also making note that that bush is warded, also pinging it so that my Pantheon knows for future. Here we push the first wave a little bit fast. I think it's okay, but this does kind of remove opportunities for you to look to harass the enemy. And I end up getting hit by that Swainy, which is pretty terrible by me. But this means when he walks up next, he's on cooldown, so I'm able to punish him with 2 more auto attacks. One thing to keep in mind about auto attacking the enemy is also the creep aggro that you're going to obtain, which means your wave is going to push faster into the enemy if you do end up harassing the enemy, especially if you go for any extended trades where you're autoing them multiple times and you're just maintaining that aggro. So right here, we're not really able to harass. Pantheon's throwing his spears at max range, so I decide, okay, I'm going to push in the wave, and we also spotted the enemy jungler topside. Swain overextends, and this little crevice, or whatever you want to call it, this little passageway between the tower and the wall is a perfect choke point for you to throw your Q in if Swain or anyone really overextends, because right in this case he's forced to walk backwards, because if he walks into me, I'm able to auto attack him. So either way, he's taking some sort of punishment for his little overextension there. There's a very nice trap that everyone should learn. Just basically placing your trap north of where the tower is because of how the view model looks. It's a very hard trap to see, and even though, you know, people who have experience playing against Caitlyn know it's there, having the visual hidden by the tower can kind of just catch people off guard or have them forget. So here, I'm making sure that even though Swain has his E, right, I'm playing inside of his range to try and bait out his spells. And notice how I'm not hitting the wave. And it's mainly around the jungler's position, because I've noticed that Kayn is staying top. You know, Vayne is all chatting him. They're having a bit of banter or whatever. And, he's canceling him again. And my Nidalee's decided, okay, I'm going to take Kane's bot side, right? So what better thing to do than let the Swain and Alistair push, and now they're forced to walk up. And we have a very deadly combo with Swain, Pantheon Nidalee, and my trap. Anyone who gets hit by this Pantheon CC is straight up just going to die. The only thing we have to worry about is Alistair obviously headbutting someone into the tower and then causing us to just have a casualty. So the gank is unsuccessful, but you can pretty much see, even if there's no kill, no chunk, the Swain cannot walk up the farm because he has to respect that Nidalee can be here. And if Nidalee can be here, then he can die to just a Pantheon W. So I end up just basing because we don't see Swain for a long time. And with the wave pushing into me, I don't need to touch the wave at all, right? Look, the wave is slow pushing to me. And Alistair even pushes it faster into me, so I'm going to lose less. That's great. And Pantheon is fully able to just stay on the resources, on the HP and mana that he has. And look, I only end up missing like 2 to 3 melee creeps, and Swain missed pretty much a whole wave for that recall. So I'm pretty happy overall with the result. Here, Nidalee's pinging for a gank. I think it's pretty impossible just because of the size of the wave. If Pantheon and I were to just start running at them, it would be pretty obvious that a gank is like occurring to them, and they can just walk away. Pantheon ends up channeling his recall. So instead of backing all the way to my tower, I'm gonna play with the assumption that they don't know Pantheon recalled, and they probably assume that he's still in the bush. So I'm staying safe enough that I can't get Alistair comboed, but not too far that I'm giving away that like I'm alone. So as soon as Alistair steps on the trap that I placed earlier in the bush, I just headshot him, and I see him taking more space in the bush. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna back up. I'm not gonna give him any sort of free combo, any sort of chunk. Because even if I don't die, and if it's just an exchange of summoners, trading my summoners for Alistair's summoners, where he still has Hex Flash after, is not a positive trade for me. It's much better for Alistair. Again, we're baiting out Swain's cooldowns, and now he has no E, right? So I'm walking up. Pantheon is now back in lane, so I'm walking up. Even more reason, I'm too far to trap, so I don't even go for it, right? I just channel my Q, get the poke, and then walk out, right? Here, Alistair decides to go for the pole of headbutt and successfully gets Pantheon on the tower. I completely whiff my combo, but the Alistair is too deep, and I see my Nidalee nearby. She's pinging on the way, so I decide to trade for as much as possible, end up taking a free tower shot. But because of this chunk, and because I kept engaging with this Swain, now we're actually able to dive, and look at the size of the wave. We have so much time, and Swain will lose so much. Even if I miss those last hits there, it doesn't matter. Just killing the Swain, even at worst case going 1-for-1, is going to be a positive outcome. And we end up just cleanly diving. Nidalee tanks because she's tankier and she has a dash. And we also do it quick enough that we avoid the timing that Alistair comes back from the earlier fight. So life is great. Now we've got our BF sword after the Cull and Boots of Speed purchase. And you can imagine what's Swain looking at again. His wave is slow pushing to me whilst my support has roamed top. So there's really just, you can see the CS gap earlier, it was 47 to 28, and he's just bleeding more and more CS. So right before I get to lane, I'm also going to ward, right? Because we don't see Alistair. We saw a Scry's Bloom hit somewhere earlier. Or maybe I'm tripping. Yeah, I think there was a Scry's Bloom somewhere here. So we knew he was around somewhere in the bot river. But the last thing I want to do is like walk up to the wave and then get flanked by Alistair. And then end up just losing my life. The worst time to die is when the wave is slow pushing to you because of the creeps that are at stake, right? Just like how Swain died on the dive. The amount of creeps, the amount of XP and gold that he just lost was gargantuan, right? Whereas, if I'm dying in front of their tower, it's at least not as bad because they still have to push the wave into my tower, and it'll take time if they're low on mana, if they've already used spells in the fight. It's more forgiving. Here we just kind of look for a little exchange. I probably could have went harder on the Alistair, but I think I was just afraid of the creeps I was losing, so I didn't want to spend too much time away from lane. But I think I definitely could have pressed harder and maybe even forced Alistair to use something, because I had ulti. And this is a big window for any sort of Caitlyn lane, right? If you have your ulti available, your kill threshold is much higher than just your burst combo, because now if they're below like 200, 300 HP, your ult is ready to execute them if they have no one around to block. And so, fight is happening in my jungle. I'm not too concerned about it. All I'm doing is I'm pinging that Swain could be there. And as soon as he shows in the lane, I'm like, okay, the fight's already over, so nothing to worry about. And all I'm doing here is just pushing my lane, keeping the pressure up. He's walking up for a Q for some random reason. I get hit by the E. Really shouldn't, because everything's super telegraphed, right? Whenever Swain walks up, it's like he's going to fish for a kill. End up ulting the Alistar and securing a kill. I probably didn't have to, but you know, I just wanted to get involved. And then the third laning matchup that we have, it's going to be Caitlyn Nautilus against Sivir and Milio. So again, like earlier when I was speaking about the items rune page, we really need to be careful about standing next to wave because of the ricochet damage. And here, even though the hook is a negative HP trade, what I'm looking at here is that Milio's already used both of his shields really early on, and those have quite a long recharge time, even though he has 2 charges. So I know that going into the second wave, here I'm not hitting the minion because I want to save my headshot for the second wave. Going into the second wave, Milio's down on cooldowns. At maximum, he has 1 shield available, right? That's 1 passive proc available. That's not a lot of damage, not a lot of push that they're going to have. So we rush for the level 2, and what do you know it? They burn heal, burn flash, Sivir gets hooked and loses barrier, gets chunked even more. And from this point, you can just call the lanes GG, right? Sivir may have 8 out of the 12 creeps, but they've lost all summoners, they've lost all control, they can't even play for push, and our jungler is pathing down, right? So, really important thing after that fight happens is you don't immediately push the wave into the creeps, because into the tower. Because what happens when you push the wave into the tower? They get the creeps for free, and you're killing their wave, which means your minions are not being denied. So, we're going to slow push, which is going to last hit. Even though this wave will crash into the tower, no matter what, I'm just going to last it to force Sivir to use Q. Even if she's getting the creeps, it's attacking her mana pool. So that if this lane goes long enough, she will run and then eventually she has to choose. Am I going to base, or are you just going to stay in lane and get like 3 CS per wave and just keep bleeding, right? So it's like war of attrition. We need to, we can't just keep the win con at 2v2 killing. Even though it is nice, these sort of small things add up, especially when you start involving like the jungler, where, you know, if Sivir is then the dive is a lot easier. If Milio has burnt his shields or his campfire before the dive, then they have less options, right? So again, I'm doing the same thing as I was last game, where they have no summoners and the wave is pushing out into us, right? So how can they ever walk up if they don't know where the jungler is, right? And they do spot Nidalee bot side. So that's totally fine that they know Nidalee's here, because now they have to respect it, right? And every time Nautilus is in the bush, yeah, there's a hook threat waiting for him. And right here, really important thing about trap placement, because Nautilus, I put him in one of the lower tiers for the sport matchups, because his season's not very reliable, and it honestly doesn't last that long. I am a little bit far, so I do place the trap behind the Milio instead of on top of where he is, because of the arm time, right? He's already out of the Nautilus root CC, and you can see him clicking back, right? Because he can only click back here. If he clicks forwards, then, well, Nidalee will just pick him up for free. And so he will naturally click back. He steps on the trap. I Q through the creeps for the maximum damage and just flash to secure the kill. Probably not necessary, but, you know, totally fine with me picking up the kill, so I get BF sword on the next base. So push this together, make sure it crashes, and Nautilus decides to stay to try and hold the wave, or maybe stop their recall. That's totally fine. But you can see, even if without Nautilus's help here, I would miss 0 of these creeps. And we're in a totally advantageous position. There's no way that Sivir has BF sword, because, well, frankly, she only pushed 1 extra wave, and I have the first blood bonus kill. So again, not gonna push the wave into them, right? I recognize that my Nautilus is taking a really late base, and Milio already showed mid, right? You can hit C tab. He's got an amp tome. He's already based, right? So that means whatever's happening mid, they have numbers advantage, and my Nautilus is just late on the map. So if Milio decides to run bot here, he's gonna be here first. And if I was to just push the wave, then Sivir just gets all of these minions. But by not pushing it, look how many creeps we just denied. We just denied a whole wave from Sivir. We just denied a whole wave, which is 105 gold, right? And how much XP? I'm not sure. How much XP? Someone's got to check it on the wiki. But a significant amount, right? You see, I'm already 5 while they're both on level 4. So I'm going to have a smoother time going to level 6. Like, if I just continue lating, they're pretty much never going to... I'm always going to keep this lead, right? I'm always going to keep this XP lead. So yeah, pretty much just collecting the wave. I'm not walking up too far because I'm just tracking where my Nautilus is on the map. I see Jarvan spotted in the top jungle. So I'm like, okay, great. Now Nautilus is closer in the lane, so I can actually stand in front of the creeps and force Sivir to pretty much queue every creep if she wants them. And right, even though Sivir builds Essence Reaver, before that stage, attacking her mana pool is a really viable strategy because she has really high mana costs. All right, and we're just slow pushing. We're even thinking, I pinged on the dragon because we know that Jarvan was just topside and we're slow pushing a huge wave, so we can at any time push this wave and just go collapse on the dragon, right? So yeah, we're gonna push those last 2 creeps in. They're gonna slightly hold the wave. I check it, and there's only 3 range creeps, and it's a cannon wave. So I recognize that this is not gonna freeze. If it was gonna freeze, I'd probably run there a little bit sooner, but this is something I do. That I already hit the Drake. I get my legend stack from the Drake, so I don't need to be there until the Drake dies, right? Because it's not being contested. Their bot lane is staying in lane. The Nidalee can easily finish off the dragon without any trouble. Right here, I should just be pushing the wave in, but here there's just no gank opportunity. It doesn't matter where Jarvan is. They're too safe under the tower. They've got spell shield. They've got the Milio bowling ball to counteract any sort of engage. So we're sort of just wasting our time. Nidalee shouldn't be staying around here. And yeah, from this point, okay, we start pinging that the enemy mid laner could roam, and it's Talia as well, right? So she has a bit of extra reach with the Weaver's Wall. So we're just playing careful. Now that we spotted Jarvan from earlier on the top side, it's only reasonable that he has to go bot side right here. So that's why I've decided, okay, the window to punch the tower and go for the plates is over. Nautilus lands a nice hook, but I'm pretty far from the engage, so I think this is just kind of whatever. Kind of lucky that he hooks him into the trap, but I'm really careful about pushing, right? Because of that trade, the Q ends up scratching the range creeps and the wave goes in. So this is not a good look right now, because if I start pushing and Jarvan's here with ulti, like, I could just die, right? But it looks like the enemy bot lane isn't even walking up, so this is something like a psychological tell where they're not even trying to contest my prio, so I sort of have confirmation that no one's around, right? I go for the play, and I'm like, okay, this should be a good time to base. And then I see Jarvan, and I think twice. I'm like, I'm pretty close to like quest plus IE, and Sivir has no mana, so this is like a gamble to try and see if like Sivir and Milio will overextend. But of course, they're really safe, and there's not much you can really do. But they can't really force a fight either. So this is overall just kind of an overextension by me and the Nautilus, and we should just be in base, because right now I'm just sitting on so much gold where even if Sivir gets her BF or she's building towards Essence Reaver, she gets to her components, I'm so much stronger with you know, the items I could buy: pickaxe plus tier 2 boots, or pickaxe plus crit plus boots of speed 1. But I end up just staying for the whole lane, and we get an infinity edge, and that's kind of how it concludes. So yeah, a bit of a strong start, but bit of a missed opportunity to just recall early and some wasted time around the Nidalee gank. Realistically, we should have just ignored the Nidalee when she was going for this gank, and probably just cashed in the plate and based while Jarvan was top. All right, and we'll go on to the final lane segment. This is going to be Caitlyn Lulu against Tristana Rel, right? So it's very obvious what the kind of playstyle here is, where we're playing double range. We're looking to harass as much as we can early, and this is a small trick I'm doing. Again, brush kiting, right? I'm not sure if this bush is watered or not, because Rel was here earlier. But what I'm doing is I'm checking with the creep aggro, right? I'm checking with the creep aggro. I order the creep, I walk in the bush, and I see that the creeps don't follow me. So I know that this bush isn't watered. Otherwise, the creeps would have just kept chasing me, right? So what I do instead is I step in the bush and I mask my Q animation while in the bush, so that Tristana has no idea. What she's probably expecting is the same pattern from the last couple seconds, which is me stepping out of the bush, autoing, stepping out of the bush, autoing, and she's probably expecting, okay, is Kate gonna walk in the bush and auto again? But no, I'm queuing. Unfortunately, it misses, but you can see the push is already won, right? We've damaged the first 3 creeps by so much before they've even hit the wave once, right? I think I totally troll here because I want Lulu to push the Rel out, but I shouldn't be clumping up with her, and it ends up just costing both of us. I'm taking so much damage from the barrier and the aftershock, so this is a complete fumble, honestly, by me. Somehow, like, Tristana just gets hit by everything and loses all of her HP. So somehow me just face checking the Rel wins us the trade. Okay, I don't know. Maybe it's just the O server thing, but the intent was there, right? Where we are acquiring the push really early so that on those first 3 creeps where Tristana has to walk up and get those, I'm already done with my creeps, right? And I can just fully focus on her ass. But I just kind of mispositioned around the Rel W, and there's an exchange of sums that's probably more favorable. However, Trist just lost her mind. So yeah, again, bunch of Q poke. I know that Tristana's walking up for these range creeps because you can see they're all low HP. So I'm queuing in the direction that, or the path that she must take to last hit these creeps, right? This is very hard for her to avoid, right? She's already on blinking HP. You can see she insta pops the cookie. And I've placed my ward after the second wave in the Fey Light Zone just to give us a bit of bonus vision. Can't remember what the jungler was. I think the enemy jungler was Diana. So she doesn't have any ward hopping capabilities. But yeah, in general, you can either ward in the Fey Light Zone or the Tribush. I think, yeah, the reason why I warded in the river was also because Rel had Sweeper. Because it's much easier for her to walk into the Tribush and just sweep my ward and be done with it. Whereas she has to walk in deeper, and you can see it's very obvious that Diana has to be there, right? Like the jungler will be there because look, she just completely abandons the lane. Tristana's not walking up; she just abandons the lane and walks up and clears the ward, right? It's fairly obvious what she's trying to do. And now we don't see Tristana for a really long time, so we have to assume she's based. And this is a game where I actually don't take trap. The reason why, between our 3 champions with the bot lane and jungle, we have no hard CC, right? We have nothing to keep them in place. Even if Rel goes in, I can sort of predict where she's going to W, but I would rather just take the more guaranteed damage of the Q. Because if I'm going to hit someone with the EQ combo, the level 2 Q is going to hit and still do a bunch of damage. So Rel flashes in, misses the flash Q. I probably could have turned a little bit sooner, but yeah, Rel ends up just suiciding her life, and we actually just turn the fight 2v3. Master E gets the scuttle for free, uncontested, and can even double scuttle. And a bonus on top of that, see Diana recalling. I don't actually cancel her, I'm pretty sure. But you can see this lane is pretty much over. And look at my gold count. 1180. Got a cannon wave right in front of me. So as long as I get like most of these creeps, I'm basing with a BF sword before 4 minutes, which is pretty good. And from this point, still have my flash. Barrier's coming up in 30 seconds, so by the time I get back in lane, everything is great. Wave is in a great position. The only thing here that would suck is if I got cancelled, but fortunately for me, Rel did not keep chasing me. But yeah, you can see how important the early levels are for Caitlyn lanes. Oh, sorry, it's replay there. But yeah, we really want to make sure that we're playing the wave properly and not giving creeps to the enemy for free, not just turning off our brain and pushing every single wave, because by slow pushing waves, we're denying more. We're also giving us more opportunity to hit the tower. If we're charging into the tower with like 4 to 5 creeps of just one wave, our time to hit the tower is really limited, right? Whereas if we slow push 2 to 3 waves into the tower, starting from when we come back to a lane from our recall, then the time we have to either go to dragon, go hit tower blades is much greater, and we can actually land more harass and win more that way. So right here, we're going to look at a couple clips involving the mid game and how we can actually close the game out. Right here, we're just playing Caitlyn Braum, and there is a Nocturne in the game who's decently fed. Going for this mid tower because I'm pretty safe, and I know that the Twitch who can open up is not that strong right now. And because I have Braum beside me, he's able to mitigate a lot of the damage and pretty much just land the passive on the champions diving on top of me. I end up finishing off the Twitch with a fadeaway Q. Kind of miscalculate my damage, and I probably could have turned a lot sooner and just kept going forward. But fortunately, Gwen is around to help me clean up those last 2 kills. So it's just about, it's worth mentioning that your champion is very fragile, and any sort of diving champions where they can just point and click and get on top of you is a really big threat. Like Nocturne, like Vi, these sort of champions kind of are really good ganking you on mid lane. And then the next clip, what we have is, oh, this is the Baron clip, sorry. We should look at this one. This is just a team fight clip going over, we've got Baron buff in this situation. We've got both our side laners pushing. I'm not too committed to this play, which is why I'm playing at a very safe distance. I'm not giving this Volibear an angle to get on top of me. But as soon as he ults in and Qs my Jarvan, I know that there's very little threat on me. So just placing traps in the narrow corridor and in the bush is really being disruptive. Here I cancel my auto attack, and I kind of just save my... I'm really greedy with my summoners, and I just don't flash. Otherwise, that play just goes great for us, and we kill him. And here's another clip where we do actually have Baron buff. I'm grabbing the red buff because feeling pretty unsafe alone on mid. And now it's time. Okay, we've shown that, or the enemy team has shown two on bot lane and 1 on top lane. So we should feel pretty confident about walking up mid here. Fizz goes for the pick on Draven, completely misses. That's totally fine. And I end up ulting just to chunk out the Hecarim, so now he's out of the fight, right? I know for the next like 15 seconds, Hecarim cannot be here. Draven just ends up falling because he's overstaying. But we can look at how we position on the inhib push, right? So I'm staying kind of center in the lane because we kind of lack vision on either side where, I could get Syndra stunned, Hecarim could loop around and look for an E, so not committing myself to either side. What I could do here, if I wanted to, was with the blue trinket, the side bush on the right side, so that I have a safety net. I know that no one's around there, no one can flank me, and then hug the bottom side of the lane. And right here, what I should be doing is placing traps just in front of me to kind of narrow the path that Hecarim has to get on top of me, because he's pretty much the only engage that they have. But instead, I say to myself, like, the mid inhib is not that valuable, and we can just get it later anyway. So to make the most of the Baron, we just run bot lane. Ends up being a team fight. Mordekaiser gets his ult cancelled from the Volibear ult, and the game should be easy to close. So yeah, I was running a little bit out of team fight clips, which is why this is mainly going to be a lane focused guide. Suits Caitlyn in the fact that, she is the champion, the premier champion, where you want to dominate lane and get ahead of the curve and snowball the game. But hopefully these clips give you a little bit of context on how we should be proceeding with the mid game. We can't just... She's unlike some other AD carry champions where you can just run down mid and just, basically just keyboard spam and face roll your keyboard until the Nexus explodes. You still need the right setup. You still need to play around the fact that you want to front to back, and you really want to avoid getting flanked because of the way your traps work and the way your net works, right? Where if you're trying to net from the flanker, you're moving into the main team of the enemy, so it makes it really awkward. Do want to quickly go over some of the ADC matchups that we want to pick Caitlyn into, or the ones that we don't want to pick Caitlyn into. Mentioned a little bit earlier about sort of the range and the capabilities that some champions have to fight back against Caitlyn. Something like a Ziggs, something against a Lethality Varus, where Caitlyn pretty much can't interact against the poke, and they can pretty much neutralize the lane at the very worst by just infinitely clearing the waves and disabling Caitlyn's ability to progress the game. Going into the C tier, some of these champions also have the capability of pushing Caitlyn back by the threat of all-in. In the case of Lucian or Tristana, and when I mean Lucian, I mean Lucian Nami pretty much 95% of the time. Here you might be thinking, why is MF, why is Senna here? The reason they're here is because of their ability to rush lifesteal, or in Senna's case with just her Q-based healing. Pretty much starves Caitlyn out of any possibility of chunking them out of lane and pushing them out. MF also has the option of just going for like quick recalls and coming back with her strop move speed, which pretty much makes her lose little to nothing every time she bases. Going into B tier, these are some of the champions where you are slightly favored as Caitlyn, but if you do mess up, your lane will pretty much just be over. If you die once to Draven or Kalista or Aphelios, your lane pretty much will just explode. So these are sort of proceed with caution matchups, but you are winning, yes. Going into the A tier, these are champions where just all across the board, you outrange them. You pretty much have full reign of the lane the whole time. There are a few cases where level 6 all-ins are quite threatening, so champions like Samira, champions like Kai'Sa, Zeri, Yunara, these champions level 6s can actually be quite deadly. But for the most part, it's quite telegraphed, very easy to play around. And for the S tier, these champs are pretty much going to stand no chance against Caitlyn. So that pretty much wraps up the video, and thank you if you've stayed this long, honestly. Make sure you give it a like, comment, and remember, if you're looking to elevate your League of Legends skills and get coached by me or a bunch of other coaches here at W2L, use the link wtl.lol/crab with a C, and use crab10 at checkout for $10 off your first month.